So you think that Hong Kong will still be welcoming place for foreigners, for expats coming here, or it's becoming more and more like another Chinese city? Eventually, it will be more like another Shenzhen, but with just with the long history.
I think both. Coming here as a tourist is so safe, you wouldn't believe it. In Hong Kong, we have a population of 8 million people, and we have 30 murders a year. Now, you'd get that overnight in some Western cities. 30 murders a night or a week. I mean, we have 30 murders a year, and then not of visitors or expatriates. They're between the Triad gangs themselves. This is what happens. I can go to any car park in Hong Kong at midnight on my own with my car and pick it up. I never even think of feeling frightened. I certainly wouldn't do that in many cities in the West. Be on my own and go up and pick up a car at midnight on my own in an isolated car park. We have a very sound education system here with free education for whenever, as well as many private and international schools. We have the equivalent of the National Health Service here. People do pay about £10 to go for a visit, and we're facing the same problems as the NHS. More people using it, an aging population and so on. 50% of all Hong Kong is a country park. People think of Hong Kong as the concrete jungle of the central part of it. But actually, there's massive numbers of places and outlying islands to hike and to barbecue and to, take your dogs for walks and things like that. And we've got a lot of amenities, like our pandas, like our Buddha, like going up the peak. But it's incredibly safe for tourists here, a bit like Singapore. Singapore, I think, is a safe place for tourists as well. Yeah. So I think that Hong Kong is definitely like that. And yet, there's all these misconceptions. When we go back to Britain, people say to us, "Are you safe?" I mean, I almost laugh. I said, "Am I safe? I'm safer in Hong Kong than I'm here in London, for sure. That's for sure. Are you safe? Are you going back? What about this brutal communist dictatorship that's ruling you?" There's a lot of misconceptions powered by various people in the West, a small number of people in the West who are very much against China, particularly in North America, but also there's a few in Britain, including some people who were here in the civil service and as governor, who really are very, very anti-China. And I think spread a lot of misinformation about us. As I said, I think I'm safer here than almost anywhere in the world, and tourists are so welcome here. And of course, the Hong Kong government and the people want tourists to come because it's part of the livelihood.
Yeah, tourists for sure. But what about people who want to move, from
coming
America?
To work.
Coming to work,
yes.
Come to do business.
Yes.
Would it be still a place for this?
Yes, I can certainly answer that question. I think that people, nothing to do with 1997, I think gradually there is a change from people coming for lifelong into people who are coming on shorter term contracts, coming for even 3 years or 10 years. People come here, they make money, they advance themselves in their business, but they go back. This is particularly true of Americans. Not very many Americans stay on here, but they never have. They've tended to go back to their country. But for certainly somebody coming from Britain, I think it is gradually becoming more Chinese as a city, and that's only expected. It was more British under the British, it's more Chinese under the Chinese. I mean, who would expect anything different? But I think there is definitely, from a business point of view, there's an incredible future for people coming here still. I mean, particularly as we're linked with China, which of course is just the growing economy in the world. So I think, and especially as we are becoming integrated, I think there's a massive future for people coming here. Well, not just in business, but coming here and working in, in all sorts of things, working in the health field and things like that. I think whether they stay on into retirement, I think probably not so much nowadays. But I think Hong Kong will certainly see us out. We have no plans to move. We go back to Scotland for 3 months every summer, and that is just a perfect divide. Yeah. We see our family, we see our friends, and yet my work persona is still in Hong Kong. It's not in Scotland.
Singapore and Hong Kong were always like this, two competitors in the region. Yeah, and some people say that Hong Kong start to lose positions after the China took over on a global scale. So it's more like now it's not the gate for Westerners to China anymore, but some people say will be another Chinese city. What do you think if You see it for like the last almost 60 years, the competition between like these two incredibly successful cities. What's your thoughts on it? What's your takes on them?
Certainly after 1997, Singapore was able to pick up quite a lot of people who were repositioning their businesses out of Hong Kong because they were uncertain what the future would be like, being under ultimately a Chinese jurisdiction. I think that happened, but I think what is now happening is that this is being rebalanced by the fact that we are having, in Hong Kong, we're having the advantage of being part of China and being part of the Belt and Road Initiative, part of the Greater Bay Area. So I think that Hong Kong's strength in terms of coming up to be equal to Singapore. And it's not hostile. I don't feel it's hostile at all. I feel it's just a pretty good friendly rivalry between the two. And Singapore is rather more, to use the word sterile and chaotic, are far too far down the road for what I'm trying to describe. I mean, Singapore is more orderly. Hong Kong still has a business of being a little bit less orderly and a bit more freewheeling than Singapore in a number of ways. So there are differences between them. But I think both of them are going to do well, I think, actually. And I think the rivalry is no bad thing.
I think Hong Kong is benefiting heavily from being a part now of this huge, the Greater Bay Area, which is like we Googled yesterday with my friend. It's like 80 million people here in the region. Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Macau, Hong Kong. 80 million people. It's like Germany.
Yes.
Yeah. It's crazy. And Singapore is a little bit like isolated. It's only Malaysia here.
Yes.
So there is a Johor Bahru, which they have like economic ties, but still Hong Kong is the part of something much bigger, I feel like, physically.
Yes. So I think there's sort of checks and balances as we go along. But many people here, they visit Singapore. It's a safe place to go. It's a nice place to go. So I don't think there's any hostility or any antagonism. There's a bit of rivalry. And as I said, this balances in different times in different ways.
Many like wealthy people left Hong Kong after COVID to Singapore and relocated their businesses or home offices to Singapore. But now also I talked to some people yesterday. They say, okay, now it's a opposite trend. So people were like afraid. They were leaving after 1997, after COVID. But now they're kind of moving back, returning to Hong Kong.
It was the same with 1997. A lot of people left to Canada to get their children born there, and then they've sort of come back.
Yeah.
But in 2019, quite a few young people from Hong Kong went to Britain under a special arrangement, and I think it's possibly unlikely that they will come back. I mean, Hong Kong, I think, is still a remarkably free society. Interestingly enough, I've just written an article published in the China Daily on human rights. That's quite an achievement to do that. But when I was researching it, I went onto the United Nations page on this human rights, United Nations Department, and interestingly enough, it says the biggest human rights violation in the world is poverty. Now, that comes as a great surprise to people in the West. Well, poverty, yeah, okay. They see human rights as being able to criticize your government. Whereas, in fact, if you were to take the UN criteria of lifting people out of poverty, China has lifted 80 million people out of poverty. And so sometimes when I'm in the West, just controversially, when people say, oh, there's no human rights in China, I'll say, actually, if you take the UN definition, China's done more than any country in the world on human rights because it's lifted people out of poverty. And they just don't see it like that. There are restrictions in Hong Kong on what you can say. There is a red line that you cannot call for independence for Hong Kong. And nobody in their right mind would do so anyhow. It's never going to happen. It was one of the 5 demands of the protesters in 2019. Never, ever is Hong Kong going to be independent. It is part of China and it will remain so. And China, the British took it for 150 odd years. China's got it back. There is no way that China is going to let it go. And it's not from the students here. It didn't resonate in 2019. If you ask students in China, they say, no, of course it's ours. We don't want to give it up. There was no cross-border fertilization of a protest movement in China, as many hoped it might be. Many of the protesters hoped it might be. It didn't resonate at all in China, that. So in Hong Kong, you cannot publicly call for an independence for Hong Kong. And you certainly can't do what many did in 2019, and that's call for it internationally. and to go to countries like the US or Britain and ask for their support in making Hong Kong independent. That you simply cannot do. So I think we're searching with legislation here that is our security legislation, hardly different from most of the rest of the world, I have to say. It's modelled on the British one, for example. I think many people are just trying to find their way. And I think for journalists and for teachers, they're still trying to find, what level is it that we can be sort of critical, in terms of teaching students about history, just the nuances of politics with that. I think there are some sensitivities, but I think Hong Kong is working it out. I'm very confident that Hong Kong will be okay.
Yeah.
We have a very good chief executive at the moment, John Mee. I think we're on track to bounce back as we've bounced back for most things before. And not to say there's not problems. We have problems of, for example, care of the elderly. We have problems of people who are poor and housing. Well, of course we have problems like everywhere else in the world. And I'm not dismissing those problems. I'm not saying we have problems and putting them aside. No, we have problems and we have to deal with them. And we have to deal with them with, better housing and more equality. But I think the days of Hong Kong being run by the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank and the big Hongs, the big property owners, for example, I think those are going. I think the very big property owners are not as powerful as they were once in Hong Kong. And again, that ties in with China's philosophy. They're trying to do the same in China with not allowing people like Jack Ma and the big oligarchs. They don't want Russian oligarchs in China, and they don't want Russian oligarchs, the equivalent of Russian oligarchs, in Hong Kong. They want a more equal society. So I think that is also happening here, and that's really to the good as well.